But how do you, and this is the one where I really want to press into, how do you, because the pressure is now be that social service organization,
Yeah.
right? And I see here in Philly constantly from our millennial brothers and sisters this critique and criticism that the church needs to do this. We have gun violence, opioid addiction. They want everything but Jesus, right? Do it in Jesus' name, but don't focus on the Jesus, the preaching, the Bible study. And so what are the principles, even the scripture, that help you kind of draw the line between here's our ministry versus here's our social service agency? So like another way to put it, I said, if somebody gave you $1 million tomorrow to your church, spend it however you want, how would you determine how to prioritize between church ministry, as they would call it, and doing good for the neighborhood?
Right,
you know what I mean? I hope that makes sense, because we really have to figure out how we work around the pressure to conform to what the world is saying, but at the same time also care about the communities that we're in. I'm saying a whole lot, and I'm about to preach, so I don't want to do that because there's no offering plate. So why don't you go ahead and speak to that?
That it's such an important question, and it's been so close to my heart. It's funny because so like I feel like when I'm not in Frankford and I'm kind of with my denominational suburban church friends and stuff like that, I'm saying to them, like, you got to care more about the poor, and you got to be doing more, and you got to be like doing more good works, and you got to love your neighborhood, and you got to care about your community and stuff like that. And then I feel like when I'm in Frankfurt and I'm interacting with any of the other church people or pastors in this neighborhood, I'm thinking like, do you guys even like read the Bible? like, is this like, do you know, like, that's what we're supposed to be doing? Like, we need to like preach and teach and disciple. Like, that's our main thing, And so it's weird. So I feel like if I'm in one setting, I'm like the social justice, get out there and help the community guy. But like, I feel like when I'm in another setting, I'm like all that matters is preaching, like guy.
Right.
And we really need to be word based and word centered and gospel centered, and that's what it's all about, So, I think that's a good thing.
Right.
Depending on where you're at, I just, it's very telling to me. There's a very liberal church that's right up the block from us, big old cathedral church. And they do that. Social service is what they do. They feed people a couple times a week, and they got clothes, and they got all kinds of places. You need something, you go there. You need a shower, you go there. You need, they got people lined up for their food pantry and stuff like that. And I asked them, well, how many people come to your, because I figured, all these people are coming to, literally lines of people to get their free lunch that they're giving out and stuff. And I'm thinking like, well, how many people do you have on a Sunday? And they have like 10 people that come to church on Sunday. And I'm just like, something's not connecting. It's not connecting for the church, and it's not connecting for the community. Like, the community's not connecting. I'm getting all this stuff, and that comes from Jesus, and therefore I should go to church and learn more about Jesus and be discipled to follow him. Like, they're not making the connection. It's just kind of like, oh, this is a place I get food, and they go and they get food, and that's the end of it. And I'm thinking like, so something's missing both in the church and in the community there, where there's a disconnect, and it's not translating into disciple making and multiplying at all. It's just, they're just giving stuff out. So to me, that's really telling, because, I was thinking, if a church does all these good works and does all these things, then surely the people in the neighborhood will come to their services and come to their church, because they'll be like, that's my church and I get so much stuff from them. And so, I love them and I'm going to go and be, but that's really not what we've seen at all. And it's not just that one church. There's lots of churches around here that are all doing that kind of thing. There's a line of people around every day at a different church to get food for their food pantries. But it's not translating at all into actual church attendance or any kind of discipleship at all.
Right.
And so to me, it's like, okay, how do we reach the neighborhood, serve the neighborhood, love the neighborhood in such a way that they understand that this is not that there's something even better that we have for them than this food.
Right.
And so it's trying to figure out how to do these kind of outreaches and stuff, and these and giving stuff away in such a way that like the word is still there, and that's kind of the main piece of it. And that's been a challenge because before I was doing this, I would have thought, if we have a great food pantry and a clothing closet and an AA group that meets here, and we're doing all these things for the neighborhood, then that's just automatically going to translate into church attendance,
right?
And evangelism and discipleship. And there's a disconnect there, and so it's figuring out. Okay, I don't want to just say, okay, so we're never going to do a food pantry. We're never going to give anybody food. We're never going to give anybody clothes. I don't want to say that. I want to figure out, how do we as a church make bridges, between those things? If that's kind of the front door, so to speak, to get them at least knowing about the church, then okay, that's fine. But how do we make it so that then they at least understand there's something more here, and we want them to be part of something more. We have something better for them than just this food or this or these clothes or whatever. So,
right,
and so. It's figuring that out, and that's hard. But it's also trying to keep the main thing as well, which I think people appreciate. So like when somebody comes, and I want them to come, and when they come to our church, they really get substance, And so that's another one of the reasons why I'm like, I really want to concentrate on my preaching and make sure that the preaching is good. And when we have a Bible study, it's not just like okay, open up to whatever, and you say whatever you think about it, and that person says whatever they think about it, and we can all just, hug at the end. It's like, what is this really saying? What does this really mean? What does this really call us to do? And I want to preach in such a way that it captures people and that it shows them what the word is, and they love the word and they want to learn more. And to me, that makes me want to like care even more about the preaching, because I see a lack of caring about those things in other churches, where it's just kind of like, well, we did all this ministry. That's what the church is. And I'm like, I don't think that's what the church is. I think
it's overwhelming.
I think the church is, I think of that passage in Acts when the apostles are like, we really need to concentrate on the ministry of the word and prayer. And we're not going to stop feeding these widows, but we need some other people that are kind of going to take that on and let them do that. And it's not a throwaway thing, because we want wise people and spirit-filled people and really good people to do this. Not just like let the leftover people do that, because that's beneath us. It's not that at all. It's like we need to do this, but there's an importance that needs to be placed on the ministry of the word and prayer. And we want to make it so we can still do these good works and stuff. But that can't be what we put all of our attention into. So It's been trying to figure that out.
And I think it's going to be rough for everybody. I think what makes it harder to figure out is the pressures around in the information that's coming in, right? I remember people always say the analogy of like the church is a hospital, right? And I'm not trying to fight with that. I just don't like when it applies to Sunday morning. I believe that the only audience on Sunday is the Lord, right? And so what determines if worship is done right is the singing, the testimonies, the prayer, the praise, the preaching. Is it glorifying to Christ? Not is it helpful to the seeker, right? Is it contextualized? I want to make sure people are understanding it, right? But I think to some degree there's an overwhelming pressure now to conform ministry to what's going on outside and not what the word says, right? You can go through Acts and kind of see, number one, they were sensitive to the leading of the Holy Spirit. You know what I mean? And the Holy Spirit is going to lead us to love Jesus and produce disciples that think, act, move like Jesus, not like our favorite politician or like our favorite news channel. So there's going to be conflict. If we're doing it right, I do believe that there's organic expansion in some way. We go deeper in discipleship, or we go deeper and we expand numerically, perhaps, but we're never going to fit in with the world if we're doing it right. We're not seeking to be accepted by the community. I think we can have conversations on having credibility in the community where we don't take advantage of people, right?
Right.
But if ministry is done right, like you said, there's a priority where I'm in the word, but I think also as a leader, I want to produce and equip people to go do the work, right? And what we have in some places is an epidemic of pastors who want to have power and influence. And I don't think any one person can have all of them at the same time, right? I want to influence somebody who maybe they do work in City Hall. Maybe they do work for a nonprofit, right? I want to produce some Abraham Kuypers in my ministry, right? I like Abraham Kuyper. And if you don't like him, don't leave a comment. But I want to produce people. You know what I mean? I don't want to be the politician. I don't want to be on the radio show. I want to be nondescript, because what I've learned is the less spotlight you have as a pastor, usually the better off you are, right? I would like the people in this spotlight to attend my church. I want them to hear the gospel, right? I don't want people to know who I am. You know what I mean? I like, even in my day job, because I work remote, I love when people are like, I didn't even know you were black. You sound like a white guy. You have no clue how. Every job except for one that I've worked at, all of them, when they finally see me on camera, I had no idea. Now, the fact that they can say that is bold, but I don't want people to know who Erik McIntyre is, right? And so, but it is. I thought you were this white guy, you know? It's like, oh, thank you for saying that. I'll think about that next time we talk, you know? But I also think we want our church to look like the community around us, right? It's one thing if you set up in Frankford and you had everybody coming from the Northeast or from Jersey, you know, and some people are happy with that. But I think we have to wrestle with who are the least of these in my community, and how do we reach, not for the sake of alleviating poverty, but for the sake of making disciples and equipping people to do the work, right? We can't do it all. And I think we are going to have to deal with that constant pressure of, you know, is the church doing enough? Well, my church isn't doing enough because we can't do it all. We can come together and other people can do. And that's why I think we need to do more stuff, you know what I mean, together. And it's just, so let me ask, in ministry, so you've been down there, is that 3 years now that 4 years that you've been down there? You've already passed that anniversary. What's been, in terms of experiencing Christ in ministry, what's been the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome, maybe that you didn't even see coming?
I think so. Something that's been hard is kind of having to let some ideals go. We kind of have these. I had these ideals of like, if you're going to be a part of this church, you have to live in this neighborhood. And preferably in walking distance of our church, you know. Like, and I had this ideal of, we're going to raise up people from this neighborhood, and we're going to train them, and they're going to be pastors. It's hard for both of those things, and there's just a lot of practical things with both of those things that make them both very difficult to do. And you kind of think, I still believe in those ideals, and I still want those ideals, but just the reality, hasn't been there. You know, I want those things very much, but it's been hard to kind of like work through that and to kind of like deal with that and to kind of say like, okay, these are the people that God is sending. And I'm not going to actively recruit people from far away to come. But if people from far away come, I'm not going to tell them they can't come. Right. And these are the ones that are coming. And how do we minister to this neighborhood with these people that are not living in this neighborhood? And how do we raise people up that are just, there's so many layers of, like you were even saying about like literacy and stuff. It's like how do I get someone that hasn't gotten any degrees, not even like a high school diploma, and has a really low reading level, and like, how do I get them to the place where they can be called a pastor? It takes a long time. Then also there's a lot of life baggage that has to be worked through. And figuring out that is difficult as well. And then convincing them to once things start to go right in their life and they got their lives together, to stay in the neighborhood.
Right. Yeah. They're getting
when
out.
they can go, and get out. They can get out. Everyone wants to get out of this neighborhood, and so all those things just make it a challenge.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like saying, like, man, I have to hold on to these ideals loosely, especially if they're not explicitly biblical ideals.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I believe in these things.
It's my preference.
And I want these things, and I think it's the right way of doing it. Right. And still, like, I would say, yes, this is what you should do. But then there's life. and
it comes at you
reality.
quick.
and it's kind of like, okay, so, all right. And so that's been a challenge. So that plays itself out in hard things, as far as, like, when we planted, we had 3 guys, me and 2 other guys, that were, like, on a leadership team together. And the one guy was ordained, and the other guy was in the process of getting ordained. And it was like, this is beautiful. This is just fantastic. Yeah. And then since then, the one guy we sent away to go kind of back home, where he's from, which is, in Western Pennsylvania. And the other guy is kind of going through a real hard time in his life, and it makes it hard to keep going forward in this area, because there's, like, life things that come up. And so then all of a sudden, I'm a single pastor, when before we planted with 3 guys, and now there's 1 guy.
Same ministry, but 1 guy.
Yeah, exactly. There's more people now, except 1 guy. So that's been hard on a lot of levels,
right.
To have that happen. So that's kind of been the hardest thing, and seeing how God's providing, and seeing how God is giving grace for all that has been really really neat, but also really hard as well. That's been kind of the hardest part.
I'm learning. My emotional cookie jar is, like, over longer amounts of time now. Like, there were things that I hoped to see in 6 months to a year before, just in terms of spending time with certain, younger guys. And I realize now, the phrase that, from the time I got married on, what my wife hated was, I just want to see 1% growth. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm spending time with a dude and he's like, oh man, I've read this and it was awesome and God is really speaking to me. And I'm like, yeah, but let's see what happens in 2 months. Like, I'm saying it to myself when I say it to him, right? Because change happens so slow. And then what I'll see is that while I'm waiting for someone else to change, the Lord is maturing me. And I read that verse in Isaiah 50 that says, the servant song about the Lord, that he set his face like a flint, and that I'm becoming more stubborn to give up. But that also means, like, that the core of it is I'm being flexible with my methods and approach, and stuck on eternity and what's coming later. Right. And it's changing me a lot, because there's so many things. Like, I write in my journal, man, and I don't always have ministry aspirations, but aspirations for people. And it's hard when you see how God is working in their life, and, like, oh man, I see how God could use you here or there. But then hard times come and they fall away, they run away, whatever. And it's like, oh man, dealing with that, right? You wanting something for somebody more than they want it for themselves. But then years later, where you see them come back around, and it's like, wow, God can work it out. You start to hold on to things, I think, with a looser grip. But at the same time, I think the more guys I know in ministry, the more I see them and get to encourage them, it helps me, because now their triumphs are definitely mine. Right. I was at, and listen, I'm not one of those people who's like, I poo-poo the suburban church or whatever. I was at my friend Ben's church on Saturday, and they dedicated a building. They have a new add-on for their school. They have a school K-8. And I said to somebody else I was talking to there, I think one of his elders, but I said, I feel emotional, because here's a place where they're committed to like a Christian classical education with godly people in a safe environment. And we need young people being raised up in that way. And they may not ever come into Philly and do ministry, but just seeing that was such a victory. I thought I was coming to see a trailer, that kind of add-on, but it was a building with cement. I was and still feel emotional because that's a win for my team
Right.
in a
Yeah.
Christ sense, right? I need to see more of that because I don't always see it where I'm at. And when I get it, I want to share it with other people because I realize one of the ways Satan works is just to convince you that this is never going to work out and
Yeah.
that you wasted your time. And so when I see a victory over there, dude, I count that as my victory.
Mhm.
I think that's why I'm so pushy with some people with wanting collaboration and seeing people working together because I realize this is a long marathon. And Doug Logan calls it crockpot ministry, and we've got a long stew to go. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so I want to see all the victories because there's going to be some hard stuff. And sometimes victory for me is I haven't given up on Christ this week. I'm still going. Everything is falling
Yes.
apart. My health's not right. I'm being tested. My hair is falling out. I'm starting to develop a dad bod. And I'm like, Lord, I'm still here. I'm still here. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, I'm still saved. Like that hasn't changed. It's not going to change. The Lord has me. He's holding me. I'm failing. I'm broken. Friends are gone. Relationships are broken. Here's
Mhm.
Jesus.
Yeah.
He's still here.
Hmm.
And if it's anything, that's why I feel like discipleship is so much important. Once you get over 40 and you've been walking with the Lord, you really need to pour into other people because those lessons are so helpful, right? Like with yours, I don't get to hear as much from you, partly because you don't invite us by enough, but I get to hear from so many other people. Like here, yeah, I was talking to Stephen and and Pastor Richie's going to go down there and preach. And I'm like, yeah, man, that's good. So while I may not get to talk to you because you're busy, I can talk to other people about you and say, hey, man, here's somebody who's doing real ministry. You guys should work with him. Not that other people aren't, but you know what I mean? And so anyway, I'll ask some rapid fire questions before we close out. Because I got it. Like I said, who knows when I get to talk to you again, man? Uh, so currently,
Thanks for saying everything you just said was super encouraging, though. By the way, so if nobody else out there is encouraged by it, I certainly was. So
oh,
thank you.
praise the Lord, man. Really, I'm one of those people, man. I have like a shared energy tank,
Yeah.
and like you can have a victory and it means the world to me, right? It doesn't have to be in my life because I know the pressures. You deal with pressures this week that I won't have. You know what I mean? I'll come and preach at your church this Sunday, and I know that I'm the guest preacher. You know what I mean? But when I leave, there's so many things for you to deal with. People that are going to talk to you, issues and all that. Like you got a building thing going on Saturday, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so if I understand you guys, you got a building, I think it was last year. And now where are you? You're still renovating and trying to get that up for
Yeah.
worship and all?
Yep.
What's the vision for that building? Because you're going to do more than just have church services there.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully, yeah. That's the plan, and that's kind of
Okay.
one of the exciting things is like, okay, we're going to be in this new spot that is, and the cool thing is it's right up the block from where we are now, and
Right.
we're still on Frankford Avenue, which is the main road, and I mean, you can see it from where we're at. And it's just so much bigger, but it's not like ginormous, like where you like are like, oh my word, we just bought a cathedral and how we're going to upkeep this thing.
Right.
It's bigger than what we have now, but it's manageable, for our budget. And it's 3 floors. So the main floor is like the main sanctuary. And then on the second floor is like offices and, classrooms and nursery and things like that. And then on the 3rd floor, it's a small room, and that's going to be like our youth area. And
Okay.
and you're sitting up there on the 3rd floor. You're right next to the L train, like goes right past the window
Yeah.
there. So it just has this like cool feel to it. And so I'm really hoping and praying that there'll be a lot of youth ministry that happens there.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of young people that have like a safe place to go, and it's a cool place to go, and it's a place that you hear about Jesus, and you have adults that love you and pour into you. So that's really exciting to me.
I love that. Well, I came to faith through Teen Haven,
Yeah.
and they had a building like that. I think they had one in North Philly, and then there was a place they would take us in West Philly. So I
Okay.
wasn't going to church. I mean, they would take us to church, but I came to them. They took us to camp, but they had a place where you could go where you were safe. You play video games, have Bible study, and that was my faith experience. And
Yeah.
so I can't like over exaggerate. Like it's so important to have that, especially in Frankfurt. You can't even go to a basketball court right now and be safe in Philadelphia. And so where kids can come and be safe and know that there are people who love me, where they can palpably feel the love of Christ is significant. Statistics even
Yeah.
say after 17, the chances of somebody hearing the gospel, believing the gospel are lower. We know the Lord could do whatever he wants, but starting young is important.
Yeah.
And so I pray for that, going to be praying for it. I hope that you guys can get that. Last time I was here, I think the third floor, there wasn't a floor, or there were some parts where there wasn't a floor. We walked around and I just looked around the beams and just kind of looked down and saw some people. So hopefully that's
it's getting there. It's getting there.
okay. So here's my rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Number one, guy comes to you now, wants to be groomed up, wants to serve at Frankford, but he wants to become a church planter. Number one, how do you approach? What advice are you giving him? How are you discipling him and preparing yourself? Because he's saying, I want to be here with you, but I want to leave in 3 years. So you're going to lose a guy. Yeah. How do you work that relationship practically into your schedule? But what are you aiming to do? Are you assessing him in the beginning? Or are you trying to pour into him? Or how are you handling that relationship?
Yeah, that would be a godsend right now. I'll take that guy, even for 3 years, and send him out. That'd be great.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really learned from the Northeast Church is when God sends people out of your church, He replenishes them. And so the whole idea of like holding on to people and not letting them go. Being at the Northeast for, however many years I was there, just kind of blew that idea out of the water. So now I'm just kind of like, sure, if people want to come and then go, like, that's great. Because then God's going to just bring more people. Like, so I've been kind of reconditioned from being up in that church to say like, hey, if someone wants to come and be trained and learn and then go, that's on the long term going to benefit us and it's going to benefit them. And that sounds awesome to me. And the goal is not to be a big, huge regional church here with, a staff of 10 guys and we have 1,000 people. That's not the goal at all. The goal is to be a neighborhood church that meets the needs of that ministers in this neighborhood. And so if we want to see other parts of the city reach, then we want to have other guys come in and then be planted out from us and go other places. So to me, that's exciting. That's not because of my experiences in the Northeast, it's like, if you want to come learn for a couple of years, take a couple of our people and go somewhere else, that sounds great. But I also want to make sure that your heart is for the Lord and for the Word. And I would encourage people, like, to me, you always make those jokes like, oh, I didn't learn this in seminary, about all the things that you do. And that's true. There's I say that probably every single day. But also I learned a lot of things about studying the Bible and how to put together a sermon and how to read the Bible. And that are things that I'm like, wow, if I didn't have that training and I didn't know how to rightly divide the word, then I would be trying to figure that out now while doing all these other things. Right. And I don't want to be trying to figure that stuff out while I'm doing all these other things.
Right.
And so to me, getting a good theological education where you're learning how to study the Bible and learning how to break down a passage and getting some exposure to original languages and all those kinds of things I think are really, really important. And so I'd be like, hey, if you want to come and learn, but you're going to get a degree from one of these other seminaries or something like that, or we can, send you to a training program or something, that would be so valuable to you, future church planter, because this studying the Bible thing is hard and it takes time.
Yes.
And if you're going to do more than just oh, what does this mean to me? Right. Then that takes some training and that takes some knowledge. And so I would encourage that guy to get that training and use the time while you're here to kind of observe, but then also get that training so you know how to read the Bible and you know how to do hermeneutics and you know how to exegete a passage. So you got to know this stuff. And don't poo-poo that. It's oh, I'm never going to use this, yeah, you are. You're going to use it a lot. And that's really what you need to know how to do. You need to be an expert at how to read and study the Bible. And the other things you don't need to be an expert in. You don't need to be an expert counselor. You don't need to be an expert social worker. You don't need to be an expert evangelist. Even you need to be an expert in how to read and study the Bible. And so let's learn that. and then you'll have that as your baseline. And then you can learn how to do all those other things, and you can figure out how to help people with their social problems, and help people with counseling, and help people in all these other areas. And that is like what you're like figuring out on the fly. But don't figure out how to read and understand the Bible on the fly. That's kind of what I want to get. That's kind of what I want to say. So let's do that. Let's get that solid foundation, and then build on that, and then send you out, and God will supply another person after you. So
and keep growing in it too. I heard Ramel Williams said every quarter of the year he reads a book on preaching. And I'll give a big shout out to Simeon Trust. We got a conference coming in October, and I've been trying to get more guys to go, right? Because you learn a lot. I've been to one of the workshops. I have an online membership. I do the courses to help plan out how am I approaching a series, preaching through a book. There's some things there that'll help. That's a craft you've got to continually work on in terms of preaching. And the one thing that's taken me out of my comfort zone is growing up preaching in a Black church for over 10 years and then moving in different places with different audiences. And, I remember just the panic of they actually give me a time limit. Black churches don't give you a time limit. You say, how long do I have to preach? They say, let the Lord have his way. You get an invite from a white church, they're going to be structured. Hopefully you'll get here this amount of time early for prayer, and you've got 35, 40 minutes, and they mean it, And so getting to the point and not losing Christ is something where, you know what I mean? And so that's good. So how about a wife? A wife, what would you say? You know you can't speak too much to this, but how should she prepare herself to be a church planner's wife? If she's expecting, she hasn't seen it, she knows that he'll preach on Sunday, he'll spend some time giving out water, ice, and book bags. What would you say to that woman whose husband is heading into this?
Yeah. Well, I would, that role, that person is so important. I mean, my wife has been life-giving to me. Through this whole process, and the fact that she's 100% on board and loves me and supports me and is willing to speak and say true things to me and encouraging things to me, it's made all the difference in the world. And so I not to add more pressure to the wife, but that role is so important. And I think for husbands, they need to understand that. And for wives, everyone just needs to understand that. But I think the main thing is so I just don't want wives to think that they need to be the second pastor of the church.
Right.
And I think that men should not treat their wives as the second pastor of the church. Right. She has a unique role, but it's not the same role that you have as the pastor of the church. And she should understand that, and you should understand that, and clearly defining that. And I would say, you really need to talk a lot, because every woman's going to, some women are just like, I want to be as far in the background as I can possibly be.
Right. She might be extroverted, introverted.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And other women are like, I know other pastors that talk about how their wives are like, have you done this yet? Have you done this yet? How come you don't do that? How come you don't? And like, you just got to understand each other, and you got to understand gifts, and you got to understand personalities, and you got to talk a lot and communicate a lot and leave lots of space for each other. I really believe that the most, it's like in a, just thinking about like your nuclear family, right? Like if the husband and wife are not right, then that really messes up the whole family unit, right? The husband and wife have to be strong, and just in that strength, it gives strength to the kids. The kids just have a sense of security. The kids have a sense of like everything's going to be okay. Mom and dad aren't going to separate. Like they have this like feeling of home and steadiness and safety. And I think that really translates over into the household of faith as well.
Right.
If there's the women in the church know that the wife is not going to talk bad about the husband, and the pastor's not going to bash his wife. And there's not that friction, that relational friction that's happening between a husband and a wife that is like felt. that, you that can give a lot of life. If there's a healthiness there, that's going to give a lot of safety and a lot of life to the church. But if it's not there, that's going to make it harder in the church. So it's just so important. And so, making time for each other and seeing that as a priority and seeing that as like an important part of church planting, like keeping my marriage strong is an important part of this church plant that we're doing.
Right.
I think pastors and planters need to understand that and say that and really believe that. And it's not
and be reminded of it often.
Yeah. It's like, if things aren't good with this, then it's necessarily not good with the plant either. Like it has to be, it has to be good.
And it's okay to have a difficult conversation and say, listen, I need to take care of home. I would sooner leave ministry leadership than have to break up the home or go in some treatment or post breakup counseling or any of those things. Right. You got to I think we need to, in our social circles, make it okay for a brother or for ladies to help their sister understand, do what you got to do to take care of home. Yeah. God is building his church. It's not on you. Yeah. Last question. I was going to ask another one, but I'll ask once we close this out. You could go back 10 years. The Lord would give you a time machine and you can give some advice to young Stephen 10 years ago. You give him one bit of advice. It's either advice, encouragement, exhortation, warning. What do you tell him?
I think I tell him that remember the big picture and the long, like do this for the long haul and do things that are going to benefit the ministry and the kingdom of God over the long haul. And don't only be concerned about short-term things, but be concerned about long-term things. And I would say keep investing in your family and loving them well, I think I would say. And I would also say this is, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not, but
say what you want to hear.
Honestly, my life got less stressful when I planted the church from going, because before that I was working a job, being a dad, trying to be a pastor of another church and planning to church plant. And it's kind of like all the things you're doing now, Eric. I was so scattered and so all over the place that I actually felt a relief when we planted the church, because it was like, just do this one thing instead of these 12 things. And it felt nice. And I was like, I'm going to take days off. I'm going to be home at nights. I don't need to prepare for a Bible study between like 8 o'clock at night and midnight. I can just like chill during that time and go to bed at a reasonable hour. And get better sleep. And like, so, for all those who are out there that are like, bivocational and trying to serve in so many different ways, it's really hard. And I really commend you.
Hard.
And it's so much, and you're pulled in so many directions, and you feel like you're doing none of them right and none of them well. Yep. And it's like, I would say like, if you can get into a spot where you're just doing the one thing, it actually is nicer, like it's actually better.
But everything you just said, I felt emotionally, because it taxes me to switch from one thing to one thing, to switch from job to ministry or family. All of those, I need like a buffer, because I can't. And then I'm like forgetting what I was doing because I'm constantly moving around. Man, you just spoke a word to me. I'm like, that's what I want. Lord, can you please get me to the place where there's one thing, right? I want to know what it's like to not do something Saturday night or just to have that time off where I could go to bed at a regular time. Man, see, you just caused me to dream, man. This was so good for me, And I'll say this, and I'm going to ask you in a minute to give everybody contact info to follow you. What I love about what you're doing is, when I was preparing to be licensed in ministry, we used to hear these urban legends about this pastor preacher named Doug Logan, right? This is way back in the day before Doug Logan was even at Epiphany. I think it was before he was even reformed, right? But it gave me kind of like a rubric to kind of guide my ambitions, right? Because here's the guy, Doug Logan, who, because he did ministry in Frankfurt for a while. He's going out and confronting drug dealers, and they're telling him to get off their corner and all this stuff. It caused me to dream in a way that wasn't popular, right? Where I came from, there were church splits, but not church plants. But here's just a way of doing urban ministry that was mind-blowing to me, right? And what you're doing is going to be that kind of legend for somebody. Like, did you hear about this guy, Stephen Bowne? And one day somebody's going to tell that story. And it's like, dude, let me tell you, this is a place, they had a lot of liberal churches. And here's this white guy coming down the street and he's preaching and they got coffee in there. And he kept doing it. He's happy and smiling. And then he had other white people and some black people. And then some Kenzos were with him. That's the word people don't know. There's some Kenzos are there. And it may be 5-10 years from now, man, but that you're going to be that Doug Logan is somebody who's going to dream, and they may do it bigger, differently, however, but you're going to spark that for someone, Lord willing. And I encourage you to keep up in the silence and in the shadows, because your story, your marriage, your ministry is going to be a pattern. Somebody's going to say, I don't know what I'm doing. Let me look at what Stephen did. Maybe I can call him up one day. I tried to to this day, I've never reached Doug Logan successfully. And I remember sending him messages, and I hope somehow he sees this. I sent him messages like in 2014. I said, can I just ask you questions? And he said, yeah, man, I'm really busy. I'm going to get my assistant to get back with you. And I never heard back from Doug Logan. So so don't do that to the young Erik that comes to you and says, Pastor Stephen, can I ask you? Just don't answer the message then. Say I'll get back to you. I've never heard from Doug Logan. I know so many people that know him. Anyway, how can people keep up with Grace City, and how can they connect with you, Pastor Stephen? I'm transitioning because I'm like, Doug Logan, why are you talking to me, man? We could have been friends. I could have went to Grimkey, but I didn't because I didn't hear back from you. Anyway.
So my email address is just my name, Stephen, and then the letter D for Douglas, and my last name, Bowne, @gmail.com. So anyone that wants to email can email me.
Stephen with a V or PH? We always get that wrong.
With a PH. Yeah,
there we go.
PH. Yep.
Okay.
And Bowne is my last name. So yeah, and our church does have a website, gracecityfrankford.com. So
we'll post it in the description to this video.
All right, that sounds good. You do that, Erik. And yeah, that's it. So I'm not on like Twitter or anything like that. I'm not like, I don't put out inspirational sayings or anything like that.
You don't have time.
You
don't have time.
I'm just not that inspired, honestly. I'm just not that.
So you could have rolled that into something like, I'm doing the inspiring. Like, anyway, we'll work on that. But it has been great talking to you, bro. I love the relationship with you. I'm looking forward to coming down and preaching at your church on Sunday.
Yeah.
Happy at the invitation. Looking forward to have coffee and talking to the folks down here. I always feel very much at home. And maybe one day we'll get together, talk and pray and just all that kind of stuff. And so for everybody that's followed along, everything will be in the description. Get in touch, pray for Grace City Frankfurt, pray for your pastors wherever you are, and encourage them twice as much as you complain. Love on them as much as they love on you. All right. Until next time, we'll talk to everybody later. You all take care.